The Last Stand at Kings Mountain Ridge. October 1780. The Carolina wilderness was silent, except for the whisper of cold wind through towering oak trees. The leaves, bright with autumn color, hid something far more dangerous than deer or hunters. They hid men, waiting for war. Among them was Elias Turner, a 23-year-old frontiersman from the western settlements. He wasn't a famous general, he wasn't wealthy, and history would barely remember his name. But on that day, he carried the same determination as every patriot standing beside him. Weeks earlier, British Major Patrick Ferguson had issued a terrifying warning. If the frontier militia refused to surrender, he promised to march across the mountains, burn their homes, and leave nothing standing. For families living on the edge of civilization, that wasn't just a threat, it was a death sentence. So, the mountain men answered. Farmers, blacksmiths, hunters, fathers. They grabbed their long rifles, kissed their families goodbye, and crossed the Appalachian Mountains. They weren't professional soldiers, they were neighbors, fighting for the only homes they'd ever known. The march was brutal. Cold rain soaked their clothes, food ran low, and every mile tested their resolve. Still, no one turned back. On October 7th, they finally caught Ferguson's loyalist force atop Kings Mountain. The British believed the rocky hill made them untouchable. They were wrong. Instead of attacking in neat lines like European armies, the American militia melted into the forest. They climbed from every direction, hiding behind trees and massive boulders. Every shot came from cover. Every movement was deliberate. The crack of long rifles echoed through the woods. Smoke drifted between the trees. Men shouted. Drums disappeared beneath the roar of battle. Elias hugged the rough bark of an oak tree as musket balls slammed into the trunk inches from his face. Splinters exploded into the air. He loaded another round, rammed it home, took a slow breath, and fired. A loyalist officer tumbled backward. There was no time to celebrate. British soldiers charged downhill with fixed bayonets. The militia retreated into the trees. As soon as the charge stopped, they turned around, reloaded, and attacked again. Again, and again. It was unlike anything the British expected. Every time they thought the Americans were beaten, the rifle fire returned from another direction. Hours seemed to pass, though the battle lasted barely more than an hour. Then, everything changed. Major Ferguson, refusing to surrender, mounted his horse for one final charge. Sword raised high, he galloped across the ridge, shouting for his men to follow. Dozens of rifles answered. The reports blended into a single, deafening crack. Ferguson fell from the saddle. Silence spread across the hill. Without their commander, the Loyalist resistance collapsed. White flags appeared above the smoke. The Battle of Kings Mountain was over. For Elias, victory didn't feel triumphant. He looked across the battlefield. Friends who had laughed around campfires only days before now lay motionless among the fallen leaves. The cost of freedom suddenly had faces. Years later, when people spoke about the American Revolution, they remembered famous names: Washington, Jefferson, Franklin. But ordinary men like Elias quietly returned home. They rebuilt fences, harvested crops, raised children. They rarely spoke about the battle. They didn't fight for glory. They fought because someone had threatened their families, and because they believed ordinary people deserved the chance to govern themselves. Historians would later call Kings Mountain a turning point in the Revolutionary War. The stunning Patriot victory shattered British control across the southern backcountry, crushed Loyalist momentum, and inspired thousands who had begun to lose hope. Sometimes, history doesn't change because of kings. Sometimes, it changes because a few determined neighbors refuse to back down. And somewhere beneath the forests of Kings Mountain, where the wind still moves through ancient trees, it almost feels as though the echoes of those rifle shots never truly faded.